after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Ben Kruse. This is another episode of Moving the Goalposts. You can follow the show across social media at MTGP ETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Ben at Ben Kruse 144. All right, yeah, right there. Yep. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on YouTube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on etbpodcast.com, and you can listen to Moving the Goalposts wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to like and subscribe. And Moving the Goalposts is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. College football is on Playback as the Ohio State Buckeyes take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. There's never been a path like this to the national championship. As the final teams take the field, everyone knows this one is bigger. Coverage gets underway at 7:15 Eastern Time with our national championship pre-show, with the game starting at 7:30. It'll probably start a little later than 7:30, but on paper 7:30. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right, so there's a lot of news to get to. I think the number one story right now is that Sam Darnold is seeing ghosts again. Seeing ghosts again against the Rams. This game I was really badly, terribly wrong about. I think that this game is probably the best thing to happen to Justin Herbert. The fact that just 48 hours later, Sam Darnold went back to being the old Sam Darnold. Jet fans are all saying, this is the Sam Darnold I know. This is the Sam Darnold I'm used to watching. A few thoughts on this. First of all, Sam Darnold played awful. Second of all, I will also have to say his offensive line didn't do him any favors. Third of all, I also think that it was a huge mismatch in terms of coaching. I think Sean McVay put on a clinic. It was just a huge, the coaching was bad. The play, everything about this game was terrible for the Vikings. Every single thing.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head right away. I looked at this overall season for Sam Darnold, and I knew for a fact it was way too good to be true. I knew for a fact that, yes, I give him credit where credit's due. He had a phenomenal season. Give a lot of credit for him going to Minnesota and obviously doing what he did there. But the last two games are basically kind of the two main tests of how he was going to be. And, Sam Darnold, of course, this was back-to-back primetime games, one against your, NFC North divisional rival against the Lions, in which they had a chance to clinch. Think about this, Nick. They had a chance to clinch it, of course, with a bye. But instead, they had to play another game a week next afterward and basically take a lot of that stain out and try to respond and they basically did no favors. I mean, Sam did no favors, and I also have to kind of. I know you, like you said, the Vikings' offensive line wasn't great, and don't get me wrong whatsoever. But Sam Darnold, I think for a lot of this season, and I give him a lot of props for, was his decision making was good. His timing was good. He basically went into the Jets Sam Darnold of what we kind of are accustomed to in terms of inaccuracy, holding on the ball way too long, taking bad sacks. And like I just said, the Vikings offense line did him no favors, but a lot of the sacks that he took, he was going backwards. I mean, he was trying to essentially roll out of the pocket, maybe throw the ball away, maybe try to get the ball out quicker, maybe throw some screen passes. And I was literally listening to a podcast earlier today, a football podcast that I listened to, and shout out to the people that I listened to. They pretty much were to say what I'm about to say right now. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions, essentially found something there for the Vikings offense. And the Rams defensive coordinator basically did the film and did a carbon copy of what Aaron Glenn just did. What they did was they basically stacked the box, double team Justin Jefferson, plain man coverage, and then basically just a defensive line blitzed like crazy, and basically said, "All right, go ahead. We're gonna see if you could be able to basically, throw at our best." And the lines for both the Lions and the Rams are very, very good. So with that being said, I think it was a perfect way that they were pretty much able to kind of crack the code in which Sam Darnold really wasn't able to be faced for a long period of time. And I just knew for a fact that Sam Darnold, especially in his first playoff start, this is why I picked the Rams, by the way, in the Football Forecast show, was not only was his first start in the playoffs, I obviously really wasn't a fan of what he did the week before. And I know, of course, you're bound to have bad games, but I just wasn't really feeling the way the Vikings offensive line was doing for him, and the Rams specifically kind of playing for the city and everything like that. Yeah, just everything just kind of started to diminish down, and I'm really not surprised about it. Yeah, that's really it.
Well, you know how many sacks the Rams had last night?
They had 8.
9.
9.
They had 9 sacks in one game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, shit. Anything past 5 is crazy.
Which is way, that's almost double 5. So that's way, that's absolutely true. They seem to have the same game plan as the Lions.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it would be that simple, to be honest, because I don't think anything really is that simple if beating a team is just as simple as blitzing a lot. I mean, and by the way, the Rams don't blitz a lot. The Rams are not very much of a blitzing team. They just happen to be a blitzing team against the Vikings because that was
which basically tells you, right? What I basically just said was factual in a way of they basically just did a carbon copy because like you just said, the Rams defense, and I agree, they don't blitz a lot. So the fact that they basically did like double probably the amount of what they usually do, they basically were like, all right, this was the best way that we saw it on film from last week, the week before, and they had no favors for it whatsoever. And the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell, like you said, with McVay basically out-coaching Kevin O'Connell, they did no favors of basically readjusting it. And it's kind of a surprise because Kevin O'Connell, at least from what I've seen a lot of the season, and he does a pretty good job in adjusting. So it just basically told me that defensively, the coordinators the last couple of weeks against the Vikings just absolutely outclassed them.
Yeah, but also, like I said, it wasn't just Darnold. His offensive line didn't do him any favors. A lot of times he just had no. There were times when he just had no time to throw. And if beating an offensive line is that easy by a team that doesn't normally blitz, then I think there's something wrong with your offensive line. I mean, like, it really is that. I mean, maybe I can understand it a little bit. Maybe they're getting to him all the time in the first half, but you don't make adjustments. You can't, like, fix it at any point. You can't stop the bleeding. I mean, this is professional football. This is a team that went 14-3 in the regular season. There's nothing you can do about that. The flip side is there were also times when he turned the ball over and just dumb mistakes that Sam Darnold made and missing wide open receivers, sometimes on just some of the easiest passes. And, there are certain mistakes that Sam Darnold made that had nothing to do with the offensive line. I mean, even the one touchdown pass that he threw to TJ Hawkinson, that was a terrible throw. He threw it behind him and then he kind of bailed him out. Right. And then they went, and the decisions didn't make a whole lot of sense. I thought the play calls were bad. I mean, at the end of the first half, when they went for it in their own territory on 4th and 2, I can understand it. First of all, it's the end of the half. It's nearing the end of the half. You're getting the ball, and I'm not saying this likely affected the game at all, but it's 4th and 2. Your offensive line has been terrible. Sam Darnold has not had time to throw, and he's been inaccurate. Like I said, even in that one touchdown pass, it was a bad throw. So he's been inaccurate, even on routine throws. And you're doing a drop back pass on 4th and 2. Like, I don't understand what you're thinking. In that situation, it probably would have just made the most sense to punt. It's the end of the first half. You're down 2 touchdowns. And that just ended. That resulted in them being down 3 touchdowns at the end of the half. It's like, if you just punt it and play for field position, all right, you're kind of stopping the bleeding a little bit. But even if you are going to go for it on 4th and 2, like, do a run play or something like that. I mean, the drop back pass on 4th and 2, when your offensive line has been as bad as they were, is just so dumb. And now the other part of the reason this is such a big deal to me is, the reason this game is such a big deal is because of Sam Darnold's contract coming up, and how these past 2 games were the most expensive 2 games I've ever seen from one NFL player.
Yeah.
Like, I've the most expensive 2 games. Think of it this way. These last 2 games for Sam Darnold probably cost him about as much money as the sexual harassment case against Louis C.K. costed him. Like, I'm not even joking. That costed him $40 million? This may have cost him more than $40 million, these last 2 games. That's how expensive these last 2 games were for Sam Darnold. I've never seen 2 games cost a player that much money. I've never seen that. In terms of what the Vikings are going to do, I don't know. None of us really do. Even though these last 2 games for Sam Darnold were bad, I don't think you can exactly take away what he's done in the regular season either. They still went 14-3 in the regular season. And you know what's crazy? The Vikings only lost to 2 teams. They only lost to 2 teams all year. They lost to the Lions and the Rams, each of them twice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
that is crazy.
And by the way, people are talking about how bad he was against the Lions the last week of the season. I don't think it would have been that big of a deal if he had if they had won this week. It wouldn't have really mattered. Or even if he had played okay. But, there were just some plays when, like I said, the offensive line was bad. But you know what? He was holding on to the ball too long also.
Exactly.
Which is a big problem, especially, it's a big problem for a lot of quarterbacks like Darnold who like to make big plays, that they hold on to the ball too long. But there were times when he was sacked or turned the ball over when there were wide receivers that were painfully wide open that he just totally missed. So it's hard to you got to look at it that way too.
Yeah.
The truth is, Darnold is what a lot of quarterbacks are, which is that he's only as good as his situation.
Exactly.
He's only as good as his situation is. And look, he still had a great year. I don't think anybody can really take that away from him. They wouldn't have been in the position they were in if they didn't, even though it was a painful ending for the Vikings, and this is sort of a common thing, which is that it was a great season with the worst possible ending. Even though the season ended terribly, he still had a great year. And I don't think anybody can take that away from him. And I also, think about it. They lost to 2 teams in total all year. They lost to 2 teams. They lost to the Lions, who, in my opinion, at least, are the best team in the NFL. And they lost to, and not to mention the fact they play in the toughest division in football, and the Rams, who are also a very good team. I mean, they're one of the few teams that hasn't even lost a bad game. I mean, they've played bad games, but they haven't lost to a mediocre team. They're one of the few teams that can say that. So, and the truth is, they probably wouldn't be where they were if not for how well Darnold played. I mean, they have J.J. McCarthy and Daniel Jones. It's I don't know how much they're going to pay Darnold, how much they're willing to pay him, but somebody's going to pay Darnold. And there's a really good chance that the Vikings are much better off with Darnold than with J.J. McCarthy and certainly Daniel Jones.
Well, the biggest thing really quick, and you pretty much, like you said, you had a lot of good points in there. But the thing about Sam Darnold is that was his first ever playoff appearance. So I understand, of course, the narrative's going to be that he was awful. And yes, he was bad. Don't get me wrong. Offensive line was bad. One of his best, offensive line was out.
Yeah.
There's actually on NFL Live, I was watching earlier, Marcus Spears had actually kind of an interesting comp to Sam Darnold, and he's kind of like in that Geno Smith category, in which of like you can kind of, if you put the pieces around the specific guy, you're not going to win it, a lot of games. You're not going to lose a lot of games. It's basically kind of like a placeholder in a way. Like he's not like the elite. He's not the just downright awful. Like he's not a scrub. But he's like, if you're going to give the guy like make like 2 or 3 year type of deal, right? They were pretty much kind of talking about this content of like, is this like a long term type of thing for the Vikings with Sam Darnold, or like how are they going to basically evaluate that? And
I don't. Yeah, I don't. It depends on what the Vikings want. I mean, they didn't want it with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
But so I think the Vikings might seem like a team that is like of all teams, the Vikings might be closer to the spectrum of being willing to let go of a quarterback, which most teams aren't. Like more than most teams, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a long-term thing? I think it could be. I think it could be for sure. I mean, none of us really know what the Vikings are thinking, but what I'll say is that like they still went like I said, they still went 14-3 in the regular season, and they were still. If you look at like the biggest overachievers and underachievers in the NFL this year, if you look at the overachievers, the Vikings have got to be a top 5 overachieving team this year.
Oh yeah,
they've got to be a top 5 overachieving team. Yeah. I mean, they've got it, and you just can't quite take that away from him either. Even though he was god awful the last 2 weeks of the season, or the last 2 games that he played. So I think that maybe he's certainly going to get paid less money. It could be a long-term thing for the Vikings. I think it really could be. I mean, look, the Seahawks made Geno Smith a long-term solution for them. And you know what? This year, they didn't even make the playoffs. And you know what? I'd rather have Sam Darnold over Geno Smith. First of all, I think he's a better player. Second of all, he's younger. He's much younger than Geno Smith. So if it's not that unfathomable to me. They just have to they just need a good situation. The issue with the Vikings is that they play in a tough division. And not only is the division really tough now, it's likely going to get tougher because this is a division with 2 young quarterbacks who are likely going to develop into better players. Like the Packers and Bears are probably going to be better teams next year than they were this year. Can't guarantee it. Certainly the Bears almost certainly, because this was Caleb Williams' rookie year. I mean, the difference between year 1 and year 2 with a lot of young quarterbacks is night and day. So this is a tough division that's going to get tougher. So that's another thing the Vikings have to think. I mean, it's almost like the SEC of the NFL this year. Certainly it was. And like I said, 2 young quarterbacks who are likely going to get even better. Another young quarterback that we obviously have to talk about is, Jayden Daniels, a rookie quarterback winning a road playoff game. I had the Commanders this game.
Yeah.
This game, I mean, Jayden Daniels played a great game, obviously. The thing with Jayden Daniels, he had a bit of a rough patch maybe in the middle part of the season. But you know what? He's so situationally good is how I would put it. Like for a young quarterback, he's so situationally good and is very good at cutting back on mistakes in big spots. But really, I think that this game kind of came down to 2 plays, possibly even 1. First of all, that fumble from Baker Mayfield when he was handing the ball off in what looked like an option play, that killed him because it was right after the Commanders went for 2 and missed.
Yep.
It was right after they went for 2 and missed. And all the momentum, they were up 17. The Bucks were up 17-13. All the momentum is in the Bucks' favor. Right. And in that point in the game, the Bucks' offense was really starting to click. And I think that the Commanders are not I like them a lot on offense. They're maybe an average team on defense.
Yeah.
I don't love them on defense. And
Mhm.
that play killed them. That play killed the Bucks.
Right.
And Baker Mayfield's had a great year, but I mean, like that play really killed him. The other was the bad snap when they were on the goal line, when they had to end up settling for a field goal, which may not have been as impactful because there's a good chance they would have needed to take a field goal anyway. But I mean, those two plays could have just been killers for the Bucks.
Yeah, I think basically that fumble that Baker had, because it was also in his own end as well. Yes, that the other one that you're mentioning was a big one, right? But yeah, the Bucks offense was obviously clicking. The Bucky Irving touchdown. When I thought, at least with the Bucks, is they were going to drive down the field. Well, they had two really chances to win this game. Obviously the first one with Baker Mayfield, I felt like the way that they were kind of rolling offensively, I thought they were going to drive down the field and get points on the drive that Baker fumbled it. And then, of course, the one that they got the field goal for, I thought they were going to score a touchdown on that drive as well and go ahead in that game. Yes, now maybe the Commanders come back. Jayden Daniels has been made this year for the theatrics. But yeah, I think this was obviously the best game of the whole entire weekend. I mean, every other game was basically a blowout, but yeah, just what a great fun story for the Commanders. And it's almost like at this point in time right now, it's like, how can you not root for this team right now? I mean, it's just a really good group of people. They're believing this group. And Terry McLaurin's been through the absolute shit of this whole entire organization, and he's basically stuck with it. I know a lot of people are saying, this guy gets to leave, get out of there. So I'm no, as obviously an Ohio State fan, McLaurin went to Ohio State, so I'm no more prouder that obviously Jayden Daniels I'm happy for, but Terry McLaurin, I mean, he's really, and this was his first playoff win, and he's been in the league forever right now. So Dan Quinn, give him a lot of props as well, even though I call him the mini Dan Campbell. I clearly do after this game, and it's going to be, of course, funny enough where you have Dan Campbell against, in my mind, mini Dan Campbell, because there were so many points. And if the Commanders, of course, lost this game, you can understand why. The amount of fourth down plays, and I understand, sometimes you just have to take the fourth downs, a certain situation where you're behind a lot or you just have to have it. I can understand that. But the amount of times is like, dude, like, you're there and take the points. You just kept doing it.
Yeah.
And like, I think it was the third time they got the fourth down convert, because it was the first time they didn't get it. The second time, they were right there. And of course, there was a drive after the Bucks didn't get it. But then the third time, I'm like, all right. And it was on fourth down too. So not only the Bucks, fumbled the ball, they still had a chance where they could have got them off the field a second straight time on turnovers and downs. And I still think the momentum was going to be there. But instead, Jayden Daniels makes a hell of a throw to McLaurin in the back of the end zone. Commanders take the lead. And then you could see Baker Mayfield's face right on the sideline. He felt like he's like, I fucked up. And he was just hopeful. Another thing too is, if you remember, I think the play of the game was there was under a minute left, and technically speaking, the Bucks still had one little glimmer of hope, in which Jayden Daniels had the ball, and if you got the first down, of course, field goal game's over. But the Bucks obviously brought the blitz. And there was like two or three guys right in front of Jayden Daniels' face. And I thought for a second he was going to get sacked right away. But instead, he basically rolled out to his right. He escaped the two guys going after him, and he got the first down. I'm like, that's special. For a guy that's a rookie quarterback, the 2-minute offense so far with him all season, and that's one thing I hope that Drake May can kind of get a little bit better at throughout this, next year and the years, to come, is the stones on this kid. There's no fear in him. Even after they won the game, you just kind of see him just like on the sideline, just like kind of like a blank stare. Like, dude, like they won their first playoff game in like 20 years, and you just see Jayden Daniels just like, all right, and that just, it's awesome to see. Now, of course, we could talk about their next game, but regardless of what happens, they were only projected like, I think, 5 or 6 wins this year. And this team now is in divisional round. So give them a lot of credit. And, of course, Jayden Daniels leads that.
Yeah, well, like I said, they were probably the biggest I mean, if you look at the biggest overachieving teams this year, you got to put the Commanders, the Broncos, the Vikings, even Tampa Bay you could also put in there. But the Commanders, they might be number one. They might be the biggest overachieving team this year. The most pleasant surprise of all of them. So I also want to talk about the Chargers and the Steelers.
Oh,
This was bad. This was so bad. I've never seen a game's trajectory go like this. I don't think I've ever seen. I mean, Justin Herbert was terrible, but like it almost seems like the Chargers beat themselves. It was so cartoonishly bad.
yeah.
It's not even like they just lost. They lost to. I mean, they lost by like throwing to the other team. Basically, that's really all they did. It's not even like the Texans played this amazing game. I mean, like some of these some of them were just like, way over some of these interceptions by Herbert were like way over the receiver's head and things like that. One of them was like in the tight end's hands and he just dropped it.
Yep.
So and by the way, they were winning 6-0.
Mm-hmm.
They were winning 6-0. Even when they scored the touchdown in the fourth quarter,
it
ended up going the other way.
Oh, that was crazy because I think it was McCarthy had like the 68-yard. No, I think it was a pick six, and then the next ensuing drive, it was that lawn. It was on like the third down on like 24. They got the touchdown of like 68 yards, and then right in that field goal, of course, the game was going crazy, just in the wrong way possible for the Chargers. So of course that kind of happened to be partly of it. But yeah, I mean, silly me for picking the Chargers. I thought with the new coach coming in with Harbaugh, things are gonna be a lot different. I thought maybe there could be even a sleeper team this year. And the Texans.
And you had every reason to think that. Like you weren't wrong for thinking that.
Yeah, no, I really did. But I mean, they give the Texans, I guess, credit. I mean, they really won by their defense. I mean, I do think C.J. Stroud made a couple big time throws, couple of throws where you had to go kind of away from the pocket. There were some plays I'm like, all right, that's the old C.J. Stroud that we know about. But it wasn't like he was like going crazy for them to win this game. It was more of a lot of short-term field. The Chargers just had countless opportunities where they basically beat themselves, and that was pretty much the Chargers that I know and love. In which in the past in the playoffs, they just come up short no matter what the talent that they have. And Justin Herbert, I love Justin Herbert. I think that he still has a lot of ability. He's a great quarterback, but that's not just a first-time rodeo for him now too. I mean, he's had a couple of times in the playoffs, and he hasn't rode up to the occasion. The Texans, of course. Another thing too, though, is the Texans, their defensive front. To give them credit for as bad of a team or kind of an underachieving type of team. I guess the Texans were one of our underachievers, I guess you can say, kind of given of how they were last year. But their defensive front is still pretty good. I mean, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, they basically pretty much attacked that depleted Chargers offensive line. I know, obviously, like you said, Herbert threw some bad ones, and he did. But it was really the defensive front for the Texans against the Chargers front that really basically killed them. And it pretty much was a disaster from the start to finish. There really was never a chance, at least in my mind, that the Chargers were going to make it a game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it had to go that way, but like also, yeah, it's not like Houston's offense was this juggernaut. Houston's offense only scored 2 touchdowns the whole game.
And one was at the end too, where
one of them was at the end. But like, I still think that like Houston is not that good. Like I think this game says a lot more about the Chargers than it does about the Texans.
Mm.
Which is, I mean, if you look at, by the way, if you want to talk about overachievers and underachievers, the Chargers this year, if anything, were overachievers compared to what they were last year.
Right.
But they're very similar to the Steelers in the sense that like they had a good season, but they ended the season pretty badly. They lost 3 of their last 5 games. I'm sorry, they lost 2 of their last 5 games. They lost 2 of them, and the 3 games they did win were against the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Patriots. I mean, the Raiders and Patriots are both terrible. They needed a comeback to beat the Broncos, and so towards the end of the season, and they weren't really playing they weren't really playing well post Thanksgiving. They were playing okay. They also had a tougher schedule, but they weren't really playing great football towards the end of the season, the Chargers. And you know what? even though the Chargers are known for like blowing it in the playoffs, I feel like, and Justin Herbert really does have that reputation. I feel like it's just gotten that much worse ever since this game because it was so colossally bad. Not only that, he also has Jim Harbaugh as his head coach as opposed to Brandon Staley.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's gonna it just made his reputation as a playoff quarterback so much worse.
Right.
And the other thing is he's gonna have to keep going on the road in playoff games because they're probably, unless Patrick Mahomes gets hurt, they're never winning that division.
No,
They're just not going to win that division anytime soon.
if it wasn't Patrick Mahomes, maybe they have a chance, but no, I'm not picking against Andy Reid.
Right. I mean, the Chiefs had a fairly down year this year, and they went 15-2. They went really 15-1 because one of the games they basically lost on purpose. The Chargers, they just don't really have a shot. The problem with not being the best team in your division, is that you're just going to have to go on the road a lot. And it's not even like a team like the NFC North where you have teams like the Lions this year who are really good, who are really a great team. I don't think it's a given though that the Lions are going to win that division every year. Whereas I think it's I think at one point the Packers might win that division. At one point, I think I could see the Bears winning that division or the Vikings. At any point, I could see any of those teams winning the division in the future. But for now, the Chiefs kind of have the AFC West completely locked up. So that's kind of the problem with Justin Herbert is that like he's going to have to just keep going on the road in the first round of in the wild card round of the playoffs. So he's a little bit behind the 8 ball in that sense too. Yep. And
he's going to have to go to.
I'm not saying that excuses how bad he was. I'm just saying he's at a little bit of a disadvantage as opposed to like Stroud, who is like in one of the weakest divisions in the NFL.
Yeah, no, like I was going to say, sorry to cut you off, is not only that the Chargers are going to have to go a lot on the road, but more times than not, they're probably going to have to go on the road in like tough places, like say like Baltimore or Kansas City, places that deal with a ton of at least weird weather, I guess you can say, in the playoffs. And for a team with a very warm climate, you look at the Chargers, you look at the Dolphins. A lot of these teams specifically, and there's obviously no knock on those teams, but typically you can kind of see their weaknesses because teams like the Chiefs, I mean, the Patriots even of old, right? The Eagles, there's a lot of really good teams that know how to play in those elements. For like a team with like the Chargers, right? A lot of their schedule is for a lot of places where it's not as cold. So basically where they're going to play in those cold places, you can kind of see like, all right, we can kind of see why you're definitely struggling is because you're just not adapted to it compared to some other teams.
Right. And by the way, another team we have to talk about is the Steelers. What the hell happened to the Steelers?
I'm not
surprised. By the time this show airs, you know what it's going to be the anniversary of?
Oh, man. I don't know.
The last time the Steelers won a playoff game.
That's wild.
That is pretty.
Well, yeah, I saw some stat. Didn't Brady win 3 Super Bowls before the Steelers won their last playoff game? Wasn't it something like that?
I think it was 2 Super Bowls.
I know at least more than one Brady won a Super Bowl before the Steelers won their last.
I think it was 2 Super Bowls.
That's so crazy.
Since the Steelers last won a playoff game with 2 different teams.
Yeah, that's even crazier.
No. 3 Super Bowls. 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I saw something with 3, but
no. It was 3 Super Bowls. That was the year they won the Super Bowl when they came back against the Falcons. So yes, 3 Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Brady had a Hall of Fame career since the Steelers last won a Super Bowl.
That's crazy.
And since the Steelers last won a playoff game. So it does beg the question about Mike Tomlin, obviously. People are comparing him to Doc Rivers.
I don't know. I could see it in a way, but I could also see it like, I'm not saying it's like an insult, but like Mike Tomlin, at least know for a fact that every single year, even with some really bad Steeler teams, he just finds a way, at least in the regular season, that they can at least be 500, like right around there. Like you know for a fact when you have Mike Tomlin, you're definitely going to be kind of, at least from my mind, around 7 to 9 wins, like kind of in that range. I don't know about anything past 9 wins, but at least between 7 to 9 wins, if you have a coach like Mike Tomlin and you basically ask me how many wins, probably around there. I think he's a very good coach. I think
Depends
he's
on the team that he has.
right. But I mean, like I just said, I don't really even honestly think what type of team that he has because there's been a couple Steeler teams, at least this year in the last couple of years, that I don't even think have been great. I think they've been okay. But the fact is, like, he kind of got them to a lot of those games. And he also plays, like we've been talking a lot about in divisions. Baltimore, right? Uh, Baltimore, of course, I'd probably say just Baltimore, but like they're one of the top 2 teams in the AFC for a reason, right? And Tom basically has to go against them twice a year. So I mean, unless you're winning against other teams, I mean, you at least have one win against a very high quality opponent with not a great roster, and somehow, some way, he does a pretty good job against it, and he does a pretty good job of finding ways against Lamar Jackson, even though they lost this past game. Some way somehow they do a pretty good job against Lamar Jackson. Now, of course, the biggest thing about them, and I don't really want to go off the rails here, is Derrick Henry has just been absolutely tremendously helping the Ravens out. It just hasn't been
Yeah.
able.
Derrick Henry is the most impactful running back I've ever seen.
It's insane.
I mean, like he didn't put up like he is like one of the few running backs who actually like really affects the spreads of these games.
No, 100%.
Like I think the Ravens right now look like they have the best offense in the NFL.
No,
And I mean, just if you want to talk about the Steelers, they lost their last 5 games, and 4 of those were 2-score losses, double-digit losses. The only game that wasn't a double-digit loss was the Bengals. So it's not even like I don't think you can only chalk it up to them losing to better teams. It's also just like they were playing bad in those games. Like they weren't double-digit underdogs in all of those games. I can see it happening in one or 2 of them, but in all of them they were bad. So I mean, sure they played a tough schedule at the end, but it's just like they weren't competitive in 4 of those 5 games against all the good teams. They lost by 2 scores. Only against the Bengals were they even close.
Yeah.
And the Bengals were winning most of that game. So it's not really, I don't think you can just chalk it up to them playing tough teams. The Steelers just collapsed. It almost looked a little bit like the Eagles at the end of last year, the way they collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't quite that bad, but I mean, it was a pretty bad collapse. The weird thing about the AFC this year is that like the 3 teams that made it, the 3 wildcard teams that made it weren't really hot teams. Like the Bengals were probably a hotter team than all 3 of them. And I'm not crying for the Bengals or anything like that. I mean, like, I agree, win more of your games. I'm just saying, like, it just happened to be this year that all 3 of those teams were kind of cold by the time the playoffs came around.
Yeah. No, you look at the teams, right? And, the Broncos, no knock on them. They've had a great year. But, like, I mean, I guess unless you're a Broncos fan, how many outside people that weren't Broncos fans were really picking the Broncos to really win this game at Buffalo? Probably not a lot. The Steelers, same thing. How many people outside of maybe Steeler fans? Maybe a little bit more because of like in the past, there's been kind of that back and forth. Upsets of course happen, but like how many people really expected a declining Pittsburgh team in the last couple games going into the playoffs and trying to beat a really good Ravens team that's been just red hot all year? Probably not a lot. And then, of course, the last game, I think this is kind of more of a 50-50 split because the Chargers, I think, were looked as the better team kind of coming in against Houston. But, like, they basically showed that in the past, kind of an old with the Chargers is if they don't play to their style, they choke. That's pretty much, they kind of beat themselves, like we talked about, kind of more than the actual physical opponent that they played. It wasn't like they were playing a much better team. I'd say they're kind of more of a split in a way, but I did feel like they just beat themselves. And that's why
I think the Ravens are a much better team than the Steelers.
No, I'm talking about the Chargers, Texans.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no for a fact the Ravens, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
But
Chargers, Texans. Yeah, that's a totally different thing.
yeah, so yeah, it wasn't like the Chargers are a much better team than the Texans, but I think kind of the second half of the year they were. And it's
Yeah,
just the fact is they beat themselves against a Texans team that basically took advantage of it. And the Texans at least are a good enough team where if you give them the football, they are going to capitalize eventually.
yeah. The Eagles. So what I love about the Eagles is that they're the most dysfunctional winning team I've ever seen.
It's so funny. Yeah.
It's really odd. I've never seen a team win this much. A team that wins also be so dysfunctional, just like in the locker room. Every AJ. And so, in case you didn't know, and I'm sure we've all seen it, during the game, AJ Brown took out a book on the sidelines and was pretending to read it. He didn't actually read it.
He claimed apparently after the game he does.
I don't know how people read books. I don't get it. I listen to
No,
books.
you
Especially in public. Like there are people
in
who
public,
like the idea of him like actually like it was obviously a stunt. Nobody
yeah,
reads books on the sideline of an NFL playoff game.
for
Nobody
a playoff
literally does
game,
that.
yeah. Yeah, no, listen, I mean, for me, I read a lot kind of more just physical articles in terms of on my phone. Books specifically, it had to be something that I really kind of like kind of coming in before I'm going to read it. And I need to have a quiet spot, like whether it's at a
Yeah.
library. I don't go to the library a lot, but if I'm going to read a book, I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to go to somewhere, that's really quiet. But if you basically tell me, all right, I need you to read this book, and I read you basically need to read half the amount of the book on the sideline for an NFL game, I'll look like you have five heads.
Right. And not only that, but think about this for a second. Think about this because there was a bit of a rift going on between him and Jalen Hurts for quite a while. This was so obviously planned.
True.
This had to have been planned because otherwise you don't bring a book to sideline on a normal day. I mean, even if he did bring a book to the locker room, he'd leave it in his locker. Like you're not bringing that to the field. My question is, how did he sneak it in? That's my real question. Do they bring how does that work? How could he have done that? Because players don't carry like gym bags with them when they go to the field. They just run out. So I don't understand how that happened.
It's maybe something that he apparently, because I was basically hearing after the game, he basically uses it to basically kind of, it's like a 90% like clearing your mind per se thing that apparently he needs to use it for or something like that.
How does a book clear your mind?
Yeah.
Books don't clear your mind.
And it was crazy because I saw so many people on Instagram basically share the story of now, like apparently it's going viral. Even like the news people, like news anchors in Philly, there's like a tweet that I saw of like them doing like kind of like a skit of like the book that he's reading. I'm like, all right, like it's funny in a way, but like we talked about, I think it's just way too overblown. I just think it is really, really odd that, in a playoff game where your mind, if anything, just be locked in. Like, you're trying to win games. Like, you're looking at a freaking book. I mean, unless you're looking at a playbook. I don't think you're looking at a playbook. I really don't. So, yeah, just that was one of the most. I mean, you talk about just odd things when it comes to, the game. That's number one without it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, it's just he's such an unbelievably selfish player. Like he's becoming the new wide receiver diva. But at least most of the time when you have these wide receiver divas that are obsessed with how many targets they get in their personal stats, at least in most cases, it's they're losing. They're losing in most of it. Like they're on losing teams, and they have a reason to be frustrated. And at least they have it. And at least they might have an argument and say, "Look, maybe if you use me a little more, we're going to win." But it's like the Eagles are winning.
Mm-hmm.
The team is winning, and you're more upset that you only had one catch for 10 yards.
Yeah.
That to me is very telling, and it's sort of another level above what most wide receiver divas really like. Most wide receiver divas, it's like, all right, we were losing and maybe use me a little more. In this case, it's like they're winning, so you should be more happy that your team is winning rather than being obsessed with your personal stats. By only, like, he was targeted 3 times and only had 1 reception. I mean, it is just ridiculous. Like the Eagles, And by the way, the Eagles did not play a great game against the Packers. They didn't play great.
I thought in the second half, their offense was pretty stagnant. The Packers, the problem with the Packers in this game was a lot of their guys got hurt. First, like Jayden Reed got down. Of course, Christian Watson, of course, was out coming into this game. It wasn't. I'm not saying the Eagles got lucky, but they kind of did in a way at the same time, in which like every single thing, because like it wasn't like the Packers were not driving the football. They had a decent amount of time where they were driving the football, and it's either that Jordan Love's, and we could talk about Jordan Love very momentarily, but Jordan Love did not have a good game at all. I know, of course, he was coming back from injury, but there was a couple throws that I'm like, is this Jordan Love that I'm looking at right now? Like, I know for a fact he can't be this bad coming off an injury. And of course, the first play of the game, right? The kickoff.
Yeah.
Of course, that was pretty much the tone setter kind of from the start. And I'm not saying that, of course, you lose a game after the first play of the game. But, of course, really after that, they really never – like, they were in the game, but I at the same exact time, I'm like, the Packers, between injuries or just not finishing, they never got themselves into a rhythm where I knew for a fact that, like, things were going to kind of start going away. That just never happened.
Yeah. So, like, I think – I don't think the Eagles are going to make – I don't think that they're going to come out of the NFC. I don't think they're the best team in the NFC.
I still think it's the Lions.
I really do. I think so too.
Yeah.
From what we've been seeing, I mean, Jalen Hurts threw for 131 yards. Like they don't have a very dynamic passing game.
He was coming back from a concussion, but even with Jalen Hurts in the playoffs, it's like I don't care if he has I mean, obviously, I don't want to risk any injuries per se. Don't get me wrong, but I know for this season, even when he was healthy, I didn't even think he was great. I know he was fine, but like I look at Jalen Hurts of this year, and if you're telling me, do I want to go with Jalen Hurts or Jared Goff to win a playoff game right now? I don't care if Jared Goff's to go to Philly or not. I'm taking Jared Goff. I just am. I just think that the flow is a lot better in the offense. I mean, I'm not like in terms of bias when it comes to mobile quarterbacks or not, but Jalen Hurts, I don't know. I really don't know. I just don't know.
You see, by the way, at the end of the game, Saquon Barkley slid instead of scoring a touchdown, which ruined a lot of people's parlays.
Yes, yeah,
that was funny. I mean, first of all, don't get mad at it. Yeah. Doesn't he know I have a parlay that has him scoring a touchdown?
Yeah, and the thing was, like, I don't even know if it was going to fully be a touchdown because you could see some like a defender like in the area vicinity. Like a lot of the defenders, at least in the back part of the defense, typically are fairly fast. So, like, it was so crazy when people were saying that, like, assuming like he was going to score. Like, yeah, maybe he does, but
I mean, players do that all the time at the end of the game.
Right? No, 100%.
Yeah. So a lot of people were like angry with him. Like, no. Saquon Barkley actually always does that.
Yeah.
And there's no point in scoring when just give yourself up and you take a knee and you end the game. That's it.
Yeah,
it ends the game.
You win the game, and you also it's one of your best players. Like you don't want to just have a bad injury, just like out of nowhere.
And by the way, did you see the Eagles fan? He got banned.
Yeah, so I saw yesterday.
He got banned from. I don't think he was banned from NFL games. He was just banned from Eagles home games.
Yeah.
Depending on whether or not how many games he normally goes to. Like, I don't know if he's like a season ticket holder or anything like that. It was just like the common stereotype of Philly fans being obnoxious and things like that. And Austin Capabianco was also banned from all MLB stadiums. Now I'm not surprised at either of these things. I mean, I don't think it's okay for fans just because they pay for a ticket to act like fools when they're at the games. I mean, this woman wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just a Packers fan. I mean, and the Packers and Eagles aren't even rivals. They're just like, they happen to be playing each other in the playoffs. It seems so silly. My question about banning fans, because I don't have much to say about this.
Right.
Although, except how is this going to be enforced? That's my question. Because I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When the Mets threw a no-hitter, which if they had instant replay at the time would have been a one-hitter.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying. When Johan Santana threw that no-hitter, there was a guy in a Gary Carter jersey, a fan, that went out and celebrated with the team. He ran out and celebrated with the team. You could see it. There's a guy with shorts and a Gary Carter jersey on. He kind of blends in because he's wearing a Mets jersey. But you see the guys wearing shirts and it says Carter on the back. And you're like, wait, Gary Carter's dead. So my question is, how do they enforce this? Because he was also banned. How do you enforce, like at casinos, for instance, they have facial recognition technology. If you're banned from a casino and you walk in, they will kick you out. My question is, how does that work with sports stadiums where like you buy tickets online, or your friend says, "Hey, I have an extra ticket"? How do they do that exactly? Because it's not like they ID you at the gate when you go in.
Yeah. I don't even know. Like maybe they have. It's not like they even have really like a tracking system of, I guess, like guests that come in. I mean, I guess you look at like season ticket holders and part-time holders, like they probably have a certain type of thing of like, you need to be specifically like, if we're essentially giving you these tickets, you're coming in and like you have like one little hiccup specifically, they'll probably just get rid of all of your tickets. They're just probably worried. But if you're like a person that's just like going into a game, they have no idea who you are specifically. I agree. Like, how are they going to know? Like, or let's like a last minute ticket. Like shit. Like, how do you know?
I mean, like Austin Capabianco is recognizable. I would recognize him. That Eagles fan might be recognizable. I don't know.
Yeah.
But even if like they are recognizable, like unless Yankee like workers at Yankee Stadium or any MLB stadium are specifically instructed, if you see this man, don't let him in. Or if you see this man in the stadium, kick him out. None of them are going to do it. They're all kind of lower level employees that are just trying to do their jobs. Unless they're instructed by their supervisors to do such a thing, they're not going to do it. So, like, I don't know exactly how that works with sports stadiums. Yeah. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be bans for people in sports stadiums, but it's just like, how do they really enforce it? Because they don't have the same like casinos, like I said, they have security better than the White House does. I mean, they will they watch your every move at casinos.
I don't go a lot to casinos, so I want to know.
Well, it doesn't matter if you go there or not. It's just a fact that that's how they work.
No, I believe it.
Obviously, because they're casinos, they're managing.
Right.
They have a whole lot of money. That's why if you go and dealers leave, they go like this. They show their hands to the cameras. Sports stadiums obviously are a lot different. Like it's just like, if Austin Capabianco's friend says, "Hey, I got some extra tickets to go to the Yankee game in like the middle of April," for instance, it's like what happens then?
Yeah.
What happens then? Because unless they're just like, "Hey, this man, do not let this man in. If you see this man, don't let him in." Yeah. Unless that's happening being told to the workers at Yankee Stadium, he can just go back in.
Yeah.
I mean, the only issue is social media.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if he's seen at a game, like if he's at his seats or something like that, I understand it'll be a while from now until the baseball season starts. But I can see somebody posting a picture of him on social media being, look, he got back in.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say, I'm like, what if he got asked? So you're asking about, like, he goes to some random April game, and basically they're like, "Oh, wait, weren't you supposed to be that so-called banned guy from the World Series game?" But nobody says anything, so I'm back. Yeah, I got a second chance, but I don't know.
So I want to talk about college football. I wanted to get to this earlier.
Yep.
So the question is James Franklin in trouble as the head coach of Penn State? My argument is no, he's not. I think he is one of at least the 10 best coaches in college football right now. He's been the head coach at Penn State for 10 years. They've been contenders for 8 of them, I would say. I mean, after 2 years of them not being great, he's really turned the program around. People forget how bad that program was when he took over. People forget how bad it was, and they've been contenders ever since. People say, now it is true, James Franklin does make a lot of bad decisions in game. Like, there are many times when he makes boneheaded in-game decisions, but Penn State also recruits at an elite level. And people say they don't win the big game. That's not true. James Franklin has won a lot of big games, just not against Ohio State. or at least not in 2 presidencies, three presidencies, whatever it is, 3 presidencies now, technically. 2016 was the last time they beat Ohio State. So I wouldn't say that they don't win the big game. They do win big. There were many years since then where they've beaten teams like Michigan and Michigan State that were also really good teams. So I wouldn't say they don't win any big games. That's not totally true. They do win big games. But you know what? I think that the loss to Notre Dame was not a bad loss. It wasn't a bad loss, to be honest. I mean, it was painful. It was heartbreaking for Penn State fans, but it's not a bad loss. Notre Dame was a really good team, and that game could have gone either way. Those are 2 very evenly matched teams.
Yep.
And you know what? It's not James Franklin's fault that his defensive back slipped, giving up the touchdown, or that Drew Aller threw that interception.
Yeah.
Which was a terrible idea. You do not make that play. Not only did Drew Aller make a terrible play, the wide receiver ran a terrible route.
Right.
That game could have gone either way. I would agree if they were like completely unprepared and they just got killed by Notre Dame. I would understand that. I don't think you can argue James Franklin is in trouble as a head coach. I think he's still one of the best, probably one of the 10 best head coaches in college football right now. He's got to be.
I don't know why, and I was thinking about this when you're talking about Nick, and I could be wrong, but this is kind of just my comparison. He gives me very Mike Tomlin like vibes in college football. I don't know why. He just feels like a guy where he's extremely consistent in the regular season. He could win some really big time games. You basically kind of know as a sample size what you're going to get, and there's gonna be a couple times they're like about him. But the biggest thing about it, like you mentioned, this loss was on Drew Aller, and it wasn't even close. Of course, this was supposed to be a guy that apparently was going to go into this year's draft. I'm sorry, but you had no
he's
show that.
returning for another year.
What?
He's going back to Penn State.
No, I know, but this was obviously kind of before he made that announcement,
Right.
in which there was a bunch of people that are like, oh, like he could potentially go into the top 3 of the NFL draft. I'm like, all right, we'll take a look. But yeah, James Franklin, at least in that game, there was nothing that basically told me that he has to go. There's been a couple times in the past that, he's had some, things that I can obviously understand he can potentially go and get fired for. But in this game, it was very, like I said, very back and forth. Penn State played a really good game. Notre Dame's also a really good team too. Marcus Freeman, of course, is a really good coach as well too. So, I think that he should stick at least for the next couple of years, to be honest. Keep on building that program. They have something really good over there, I think, right now. And, they had a lot of good players, of course, Carter. And, Aller, I know had a really bad game. I don't think he's an awful quarterback, but I do think that he needs that extra to basically kind of prove to me. I mean, like you said, that interception, right?
It was a dumb decision. You do not make that throw.
And it was the timeliness of it. If you remember the ensuing drive beforehand, this was right about a minute, and Notre Dame got the ball. And I thought for a sec that Riley Leonard was going to basically march them down the field and kick the field, and that was game. But instead, Penn State actually got a stop, and Drew Aller basically was in his own end. And I told myself, all right, just don't be dumb. You're under a minute. Legitimately, if it's something that has to take a sack, throw a ball away. But what does he do? Not only he gets in trouble in terms of in terms of the pressure, but he basically turns his body and throws to the middle of the field. I'm like, no, like as a quarterback, especially where he is right now in his career days, like that's not only a rookie mistake, that's like a mistake you shouldn't be seeing even in high school, honestly. And of course, a mistake's a mistake. He basically said after the game, because I was listening to his presser, he basically said he was trying to throw the ball into the ground. Then what do you?
That was the worst attempt at throwing the ball into the ground I've ever seen. If that's the case.
Yeah, and it was right by the sideline too. Like, dude, throw the ball away and live another down. Like exactly in that moment of time. Like it's one thing if you make that during the game, of course, still a dumb mistake, but it was the timing of it that really made it dumb.
Yeah, and quickly, I also I want to talk about Ohio State beating Texas. Going to the national championship game. I know you're very happy about it as a Buckeye fan.
Yes, sir.
I think that, look, Ohio State, like I said, they're the hottest team in the country right now, just from everything that I've seen. It's almost like it reminds me a little bit of the 2014 Ohio State team a lot, actually, because they were not the best team in the regular season. and they would not have made the playoff under the previous structure. But the playoff gets expanded, and they end up making it because it was expanded. And now that they're in it, they really took the bull by the horns and are the hottest team in the country right now. I mean, talent-wise, Ohio State, they have the most talented offense, I would say. And I would have said this 2 months ago, by the way. That's not just now. They have the best wide receivers and probably the best running backs, too, in the country. The best packages, I would say, of running backs and wide receivers. And I'd also have to say, they do have they might even have the best coordinators. Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles are both tremendous coordinators. They probably have the best coordinators, too. And after that Michigan loss, it just seems like that Michigan loss lit a fire under them. I mean, one thing, we were talking about Penn State, and Penn State is the type of team that wins all the games they're supposed to win, and they lose all the games they're supposed to lose. I would say it seems like, or most of the games they're supposed to lose, it seems like. Ohio State is the opposite. They lose a whole lot of games they're supposed to win, and they win a whole lot of games they're not supposed to win. The Ohio State is much more extreme with it in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, after that really bad loss under the previous system, the season would have just been done.
Right.
Off to a meaningless bowl game, you go. That's how the previous system was. But because of the new system, because of the expanded play, they had a new chance. They had a chance to actually redeem themselves, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm really proud of obviously the group and the team. I mean, I told my brother after that Michigan loss, I'm like, all right, Ryan Day should be fired. He should be under the hot seat because, of course, we've seen the song and dance for the last several years, and maybe down the road it could be the same exact thing. But at least for this point in time, something must have happened. Somebody must have told him something right after the Michigan loss and been like, all right, do you want this loss to basically be pretty much the whole entire season in terms of kind of looking back at it? Or of like, all right, we have ourselves another chance to go into the college football playoff and make a statement. Basically get a lot of that sour taste out and from behind. And it wasn't like they went through this to get to the national championship and play a lot of really bad teams. They played a lot of pretty solid teams, kind of given all things considered. I mean, Tennessee was a pretty good team, but they came into Ohio Stadium, and Ohio State offensively, very good. And I thought to myself, all right, if you at least won one of the college football playoff games, I could live with it because I don't really know my overall faith being Oregon on the road essentially and them doing it again. But they did it. They had a really good, strong start. They did it again. So I'm like, all right, now they're in the Cotton Bowl against Texas. Technically speaking, a really away game because they had mostly, I'd say, all Texas fans at Cowboy Stadium.
Was it, though?
I don't really know in terms of the split.
I think you're forgetting how big of a state Texas is.
Right. But in terms of the Ohio State fans in Texas, I mean, who would? I mean, unless you're Ohio State alum, like.
Well, look, Ohio State alum probably. I would venture to guess there's a lot of Ohio State alum or high earners. Yeah, it's a pretty good school, and a lot of them probably could fly to the game.
Oh, 100%.
And Texas fans, keep in mind, Austin, Texas is like 3.5 hours away.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it may have been fairly equal.
Right. Well,
I don't know. I don't know for a fact. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I think just kind of coming to this game, it's like Texas going to play at like the Bengals stadium in a way. Yeah. So like you kind of have like a little bit of a home field advantage, technically speaking. So I kind of looked at it more of an away game, but regardless, they found a way to win. And Ohio State, we talked about, of course, them getting off strong. They got off strong in this Cotton Bowl game, but then their offense kind of really, got stagnant. And
yeah, they didn't. The thing is, they beat them. The thing is, they didn't play a great game, Ohio State.
No,
nope. They left a lot of points on the table, especially in the first half.
Yeah, and all their wins have been by double scores. So the fact that being said is, and I know we're really running low on time here, but Texas, Quinn Ewers, last year, Texas had a chance, an opportunity to potentially win that game at the end against Washington. Didn't happen. Ohio State kind of took away from them this year too. So give them credit.
Yeah, and by the way, I want to give Texas credit too. They also had a pretty good year. It's just that Georgia kind of had their number a little bit.
They got Arch next year too, so they're definitely on the upswing for sure.
Yeah, it's also It's also just sort of like I never thought. It's almost like since the whole NIL thing, the SEC has been less dominant. In the past 10 seasons, 8 of the last 10 national championship winners, 6 have been SEC teams, 8 of them have been in the Deep South. Now, this year, we have a national championship game with 2 teams north of the Mason-Dixon line. It's just sort of interesting.
Yeah,
it's sort of interesting, the shift we're seeing.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. I think we're probably going to see.
By the way, it happened last year too. By the way,
yeah, we're probably going to see though a championship of not Georgia, Alabama, at least kind of 2 of them. It'll be kind of something different, kind of something where it's kind of new blood for a change. So
yeah.
We'll see what happens.
So we're reaching the end of the show. So it's time for another edition of Unnecessary Wagers.
Let's do it.
So Rams money line over the Eagles. I love the way the Rams have been playing. I think the Eagles haven't looked great. I think the locker room seems sort of dysfunctional. For the way the Rams have been playing, I really like the Rams to win outright.
I don't know about outright for me, but
Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins as anytime touchdown scorers. Jeremiah Smith, 80 or more receiving yards, and Ohio State money line. Nico Collins, 80-plus receiving yards. Chiefs money line. Patrick Mahomes, 250 or more passing yards, and 2 or more passing touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes. Over 51.5 in the Ravens-Bills game, and Derrick Henry is an anytime touchdown scorer.
Okay.
Lions money line. The over 55.5. Jahmyr Gibbs is an anytime touchdown scorer, and David Montgomery is an anytime touchdown scorer in the Commanders Lions game.
Yeah, that's a lot. All right. So we don't even start. All right. So the Ohio State Notre Dame game. Judkins and Trevon Henderson. I'm gonna go. I think one is gonna score. I don't think both are.
All right.
I think Notre Dame has a really good defense, so I think it's gonna be tough for that. Jeremiah Smith, what was that? Receiving yards?
80 or more receiving yards.
I think I'm going to go over. I think that, he had a really kind of a tough one last week. I think he blossoms on this upcoming game. The Bills and Ravens game.
Yes.
So anytime touchdown for Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
100% yes.
I mean, it's as an anytime touch. I'm not sure what the odds are on that. I'm sure it's very, very low. It might be the easiest leg of this
lock.
One.
That's a lock. If we talk about lock of the weeks, this is my lock.
Well, unless God forbid he gets injured or something like that.
Yeah, this is my lock of the unnecessary wagers here on the post.
Yeah, I put it.
And then Patrick Mahomes over 250 yards passing. Under. I think the Texans have a pretty good secondary, and they pretty much kind of held him in check. I think for the most part when they played him in Arrowhead. I do think that they're going to throw the football, but I do think the Texans are going to really focus on the pass in this game. I think it's going to be more of a running game for the Chiefs that basically beats them on this one. And then what was the other thing for the Chiefs Texans game? Money line?
I did have the Chiefs money line. Yeah, that's the
Chiefs money line. That's also a lock too. If I had a lock of the week.
Well, yeah, it's a pretty easy one.
Yeah, so that's that.
All right, so thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Moving the Goalposts. We'll be back next week. Peace out.